Hello Raptors fans, and oh boy do I ever have an exciting one to cover today. The Toronto Raptors defeated the Boston Celtics last night 119 to 118 in what was a thoroughly enjoyable game from start to finish. And not just because the Toronto Raptors won the game. It was also a very close game towards the end, and I'm really excited to get into it and break down what I saw during this game. So let's jump right in. The Toronto Raptors exploded out of the gate, draining tons and tons of threes. At one point, they were up 41 to 20, which is the mirror image of what happened to them against Boston in their gym when the Boston Celtics were up 41 to 20 at the end of the first quarter in their previous game. So a little bit of turnabout here, and it was done in a very similar way to how the Celtics were beating down the Raptors in that first meeting, because the Toronto Raptors got very hot from beyond the arc and put the Celtics in a big hole early. The two culprits for the Raptors who were doing all of the damage were Scottie Barnes and Gradey Dick, who really had fantastic games, especially in that first quarter. Scottie Barnes was 4 for 5 from 3. He just got unbelievably hot and was making heat check after heat check. It was pretty wild to watch. I haven't really seen Scottie Barnes do anything like that in his career, so it was a real treat to be able to see him do it against the Toronto Raptors rival, the Boston Celtics. And the Boston Celtics, unlike the last game, weren't super shorthanded. They were playing some bench players in their starting lineup, notably Al Horford, because Kristaps Porzingis is out with injury until December, I believe, and they were missing Drew Holiday. But other than that, they were almost at full strength. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown were both starting the game. Derek White was also in the lineup, so this was close to what you might see in a regular season game. Obviously, the bench saw a significant number of minutes, and also the Toronto Raptors were shorthanded as well. So it was a pretty exciting and evenly matched game. And one of the reasons that it was so exciting was because some of the players, the guys that I called out the last time they played, had bounce back games. And why don't we start with the guy who had the biggest bounce back from the last game to this one, Scottie Barnes. Scottie Barnes had his best preseason game, and I'll tell you what my theory is why it looked so much different this time around. Number one, they were playing in Toronto. Obviously, you get a bit of a lift from the hometown, but the other was the level of competition. So in the first game, as I mentioned, the Celtics were playing their entire bench. They didn't have one starter playing during that game at all, and I think perhaps Scottie Barnes wasn't taking it as seriously as this game, in which he was going up against some marquee stars like, I was about to start with Derek White, but Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are the two biggest stars on the Boston Celtics, and they were playing this game, so I think Scottie Barnes took this one a little bit more seriously, and boy, did it ever show. He finished with a near triple-double, 26 points, 10 assists, 9 rebounds, 1 steal, and unfortunately 5 turnovers, but, you know, not a perfect game, but pretty close to it. I really enjoyed his energy level. I thought he was playing with vim and vigor. He really impressed me with his perimeter defense on one particular play when he was guarding Jason Tatum, and he stayed with Jason Tatum the entire time, just really locked in, being aggressive, just getting up into his space and making Jason Tatum settle for a 3, which he contested very well, and Jason Tatum missed the shot. So that was a small one sequence, but you know, you can tell, especially with forward-sized players. So he wasn't doing very well against Peyton Pritchard the other night, and I think part of that is because Peyton Pritchard is faster and quicker and more guard-like. I think if Scottie Barnes is going to guard a perimeter player, guys like Jason Tatum are more his speed, both literally and figuratively. They're bigger, they're not as quick with the ball in their hands, their moves are maybe a little slower so he can stay with them, and then he has the size to bother their shots. So that's something that you can keep an eye on in the regular season, is who he matches up with on the floor. And if it's guys like Jason Tatum and you need him to guard a perimeter player like that, that's kind of will be his forte in that area. There was one sequence that was a little concerning. I'm not going to read too far into it because I think Scottie had just such a magnificent game, was during the third quarter when the Celtics were making a comeback. Scottie Barnes threw a pass. It was deflected out of bounds. Scottie believed that it was off of a Celtics player, and he was kind of incensed that it was called off on the Raptors, so it was Celtics ball, but he was adamant that it was Raptors ball. And he wanted the bench to challenge the call. He was yelling at the bench all the way back up the floor to challenge it, and then Derek White got the ball in transition and just pulled up and shot an uncontested three, and then Scottie seemed upset about the whole situation, ran down to the other end of the floor, and then proceeded to bowl over Derek White. So Derek White involved in all three of those plays, and it was a turnover on that end. That's kind of kickstarted the Celtics getting back into it. So that was a negative. I think that if Scottie wants to be the leader of the team, he's just got to avoid that kind of situation completely. Water under the bridge. He was great. His playmaking was superlative. His ability to find guys in transition, especially Gradey Dick, his ability to break down the defense, get into the paint, and create for his teammates, his shooting, his finishing at the basket. It was all great tonight. Very pleased with this bounce-back performance. Hope that he can carry that kind of performance through to the regular season and get up for all of the games. That's what I want to see. I think if he takes the game seriously like he did last night, everything's going to go so much better for the Toronto Raptors. So that's Scottie Barnes. Moving along, we're going to talk Gradey Dick. So Gradey Dick had an uneven performance in the last Celtics game. He hit a lot of threes, but was a turnstile on defense and, had trouble finishing. Mediocre game for him last game. This game, completely different story. He went off. He completely popped off. And part of it was playing off of Scottie Barnes. Scottie Barnes, as I mentioned, was getting into the paint. He was drawing extra defenders. He was really collapsing the defense, and Gradey Dick, at least for the first part of the game, was just making hay out of that. He got a number of open shots off of dribble penetration, and he cashed them. His shot is looking fast. He is not hesitating. He is letting it fly. You can tell that he is really motivated to shoot the basketball, which is exactly what you want to see from your shooters. He finished 3 for 8 from 3, which is pretty good, but his whole game, and once the 3 started going in for him, I think he really operates behind his shot. I think he goes as his shot goes. When his 3 is going in, he gains that extra little bit of confidence, and he was back cutting. He was getting out in transition. He was really showing how quick he can be A to B, and that's an interesting part of his game. I think that this is my personal theory, but this is kind of what I've been observing, is that when he doesn't have the ball in his hands, he's a lot better at finishing at the basket. And part of the reason for that, I believe, is that when he dribbles the ball, he puts his head down a little bit. He's not as quick with the ball in his hands. And when you see him in the open court catching a pass from another player, or perhaps on a cut, cutting to the basket, catching it in stride, he's getting to the rim. He is getting behind guys. He's a lot faster than they think he is. There was a lot of times, especially against the 2 stars on the Boston Celtics, who were not paying attention to him in the corner. He back cut to the rim. He back cut both Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum on a number of occasions last night, beat them to the rim, caught the ball, and laid it in with a variety of different high degree of difficulty layups. So Gradey Dick's touch was on full display. He had a number of shots where it caromed high off of the backboard and dropped in. He managed to get the ball to sit on the rim for what felt like 10 seconds. That's just how softly he's putting the ball on the rim. It didn't go in, but I don't think I've ever seen a ball hang on a rim for as long as it did, right on the front rim. It was just balanced there almost. But yeah, his touch around the rim was on full display. His ability to get out in transition, his ability to cut, his shooting ability, he was all over the place. And the defense was not good. I mean, I can't put lipstick on a pig. That's not his strength as a player, at least at this point in his career. But everything else was there. I was just very pleased. This is the kind of performance that I expect Gradey Dick could turn in almost every night as a pro if he reaches his potential. So super satisfied with his performance last night. Next up, Ochai Agbaji. Ochai Agbaji led the team in plus-minus last night. He was a strong defender. He picked up Jason Tatum. He picked up Peyton Pritchard. He picked up pretty much anybody they asked him to on the perimeter. He had 16 points. He only shot 1 for 4 from 3, which is something that I think he really needs to pick up. But other than that, he has made me feel a lot better about that trade that they made with the Utah Jazz last season. It was looking kind of grim for him at the end of the last season, and it's even during Summer League. He was not good in the Summer League. I know it doesn't mean a ton, but I want to see how guys are playing, and he was struggling in the Summer League to create against a much lower level of competition. What Ochai Agbaji is a complementary player. He is not a A1 guy on the offensive side of the ball. He needs to play off of other players in order to be at his best. And when he plays with players who create things for him, make his job easier, he can do the stuff that he wants to do on the offensive end of the ball. He can shoot open jump shots. He can catch the ball off of penetration and make an easy play for himself. He can do the smart things. That is what I have been impressed with, is that he is certainly a heady player. He knows how to play the game, and he is making the correct decision in the half court in transition. You can tell that upstairs he's got a lot going on. So I've been impressed with his play in preseason, and I mentioned in my last video that I sort of foresaw him as the 5th starter because of Gradey Dick's defensive shortcomings. And while obviously this game was a bit of an eye-opener when you could see just what Gradey is capable of doing, I think I still may be on the Ochai Agbaji starting bandwagon. And the reason for that is because I think with IQ and RJ back in the lineup, the Raptors are going to need a low usage role player in the starting lineup. And the only thing that gives me pause when I talk about that in terms of Ochai is, can he shoot the ball? If his shot is above 35% and he can make enough of them to keep the defense honest, that is who I would pick. And yes, Gradey Dick can space the floor. But when you look at the starting lineup, you have to think about usage. And what usage means is when there are 5 players on the floor, how the pie is sliced. So if everybody got an equal number of shot opportunities, the pie would be sliced into 5 equal parts of 20%. Now in their careers, RJ, Scottie, Emmanuel Quickley, these guys are all around or over 25% usage. And you don't have to be a math whiz to know that if 3 of your starters are in that 25% usage category, then there is only 25% of the ball left for the final 2 starters, so Poeltl and whoever the 5th starter may be. Now, the question is, do you want to have Gradey Dick in there as the 4th guy in the pecking order and then concede a lot of stuff on the defensive end? Or do you want perhaps Ochai Agbaji, who I would be totally fine with having that smaller slice of the pie because he could play completely off of all of the other players, be an opportunistic scorer. He doesn't need to have the ball or get a lot of shot opportunities. And then he brings what you need on the defensive end. And then off of the bench, once some of the starters go to the bench, you need a guy who can take a bunch of shots and make a bunch of shots. Who does that sound like? Hey, Gradey Dick, if you want to see him get a ton of shots, which I do, maybe that would be the role for him. So it's something to consider. I know a lot of people, I was super happy with what I saw from Gradey Dick, but that's another thing that you should consider when thinking about the 5th starter. Move it along. Davion Mitchell had a very good game. Good defensively. Some of the criticisms that I had last week and the week before that still apply. He's not a guy who's really taking a ton of shots, but he did have 9 points on 3 for 6 shooting from 3. So all of his points came from the 3-point line. He was just catch and shoot. That was his role. But guess what? If that's your role, you got to do it. And he did. Kudos. He had 10 assists last night. So that was a very, very good development. And then on defense, he was disruptive. He did his thing. I was pleased with his performance. I'm kind of bouncing back and forth on the guy. Like, I'm curious what it's going to be like when he comes off of the bench. I've mentioned before that I want to see what the synergy is like with Kelly Olynyk, because it seemed like last night was the perfect thing for him, where he could set up his teammates, and then his scoring came from catch and shoot, which he has been pretty good at, especially the past couple of years. So pleased with that performance. And last of all, we'll talk about Jakob Poeltl. It's becoming kind of a meme right now because Jakob Poeltl, you know what he's going to bring. Defense, he's going to be able to score at the rim. He is going to bring a steadying influence both on defense and on offense. His screens are great. He grabs rebounds. He is a deterrent at the rim. Guys are not trying to challenge him all that much inside. And the only criticism that I have for him is that he had 4 turnovers a game last night. And I think that when he is a major part of your offense, that's going to be something that happens. He wants to set guys up and he wants to make the right pass, and he is doing the right thing most of the time, but his vision, sometimes he misses. Like, he'll throw the ball away trying to get the ball up the court quickly. He'll try to make a pass that's a little too ambitious. And I like the thought process, but the results are a little concerning. I think once you see other playmakers come back into the lineup, he'll be asked to do that less, which I think is good. His skills are clearly just finishing. He had a number of really good finishes last night where he looked very quick, nimble, agile, going to the rim with a number of very pretty looking layups. And yeah, I was satisfied with his performance. 16 boards is a lot. And now let's talk about the bench. This one was not as exciting from a bench point of view. Jonathan Mogbo had 0 points, so I have to pump the brakes on the Mogbo hype wagon. I think that he is a good defensive player. I'm still intrigued, but obviously last night wasn't a great representation of what I think he's capable of. Jamal Shed, unfortunately, hurt his hamstring doing his thing, which was really being a pest on defense, going quick, really getting up into guys, and it looked like he overexerted himself, pulled his or hurt his hamstring, and hopefully he's okay because I've liked what he brought from an energy standpoint. In terms of guys who are on the cusp of making the team and have impressed me, we got to talk Jamison Battle. He was the leading scorer off the bench. He had 8 points. He had a number of really nice plays in this game. He hit an above the break 3, which is encouraging because I think most of the threes that he shot came from the corners this preseason. He had a really nice sequence where he came around a screen, pulled up, and drained a mid-range shot right in Peyton Pritchard's face. He had a really good hustle play at the end of the game when the game got really close. He dove on the floor, grabbed the ball, and managed to save the possession and get the Raptors managed to convert on that possession and go ahead. I am liking what I'm seeing from him. He's a big guy. He's 6'7". You can tell that he's not a shrimp on the court. I don't know if that's going to translate to great defense or great rebounding or the other things you associate with being tall. But what I think it means is that he's going to be able to get his shot off most of the time on the perimeter. His shot's going to be bothered less, which is what you want from a shooter. So yeah, he's making a statement. I have noticed every time he gets into the game, it doesn't matter if it's 5 minutes. In this game, it was 16 minutes. Darko's giving him a little bit more of a leash to see what he's got. No matter how many minutes he gets, the guy is going to make a 3. That is a big statement. Like, that is not something you can say about a lot of players. I am intrigued, and I would not be surprised if he made the final roster. Chris Boucher did not have a very impactful game. As I mentioned, offensive rebounds are his forte, and you can kind of see how he goes by just looking at the offensive rebounding stat. He had 1 offensive rebound, 2 points, 1 for 4 from the field. Not a great performance. And he let Jason Tatum get past him, and then Jason Tatum absolutely yammed it on Bruno Fernando. And why don't we move along to Bruno Fernando? I've been ragging on this guy every week. I'm not going to be too personal. I think there's a limit to how mean I can be. Well, I'm just going to say that I don't think he should make the final roster. He fouled out of last game, and there were some frustrating moments, a lot of frustrating moments. But I'll leave it at that because I don't want to go too far into it. You can see what I've said about him in past videos. That kind of stuff still applies here. Last but not least, we got to talk about Brandon Carlson. Brandon Carlson played 1 minute after Bruno Fernando fouled out. And in that 1 minute, he had arguably the play of the game. Jordan Walsh got the ball at the top of the key. At the end of the game, the Raptors were ahead by 1 point, blew past his defender into the lane, only 1 guy back to save the day. Brandon Carlson reads the play correctly, sees Jordan Walsh going for a layup, and swats it out of bounds for the win. Game-winning block from Brandon Carlson. And to be honest, I think that he should simply get Bruno Fernando's minutes from here on out. The thing about Brandon Carlson, and he showed it in spades in that 1 minute, is that the guy is trying to play defense. He is doing that thing that I said last game, which is he is trying to challenge shots around the rim, which is what I want to see from the center on my team. I want to see that player trying to put out fires around the rim, and he to his credit, tries to do that. So give him the rest of Bruno Fernando's minutes. Let's see how he plays. Hopefully he can rediscover his shooting form that he showed in college and in summer league and be the pick and pop stretch five that he has the potential to be. So yeah, I want to see more from him. And there were a couple of other players that played last night as well, but nobody really stood out. As for the preseason on the whole, the Toronto Raptors handed the Celtics their first preseason loss. The Raptors moved to 2-2, and their next game will be against the Brooklyn Nets on Friday. That should be a good contest. The Nets appear to be one of the teams who will be in the lottery discussions in the Eastern Conference. So if the Raptors want to distinguish themselves as maybe not one of the basement caliber teams in the Eastern Conference, beating the Nets would be a good benchmark to set. The Toronto Raptors are still very banged up. RJ Barrett is still a couple of weeks away from getting healthy. Jakob Poeltl with the same injury, but he was injured earlier, so he should be back sooner. So the two guys in the rotation that you might be able to see in the final couple of preseason games are Kelly Olynyk and Immanuel Quickley. Kelly Olynyk, who has been having back issues, and Immanuel Quickley, who has a sprained thumb. So it'll be interesting to see if those guys return for Friday's game against the Brooklyn Nets. But overall, this was a very spiriting win. It made me feel a lot better about certain players, especially Gradey Dick. Ochai Agbaji, again, was very impressive. And of course, after his last game, Scottie Barnes reminding everybody that yes, when he is feeling good, when he is motivated, that he can just be one of the top players in the league. He had a better game than Jason Tatum, similar number of minutes, did pretty much everything that you could expect a player to do on both sides of the ball. Very encouraging performance. I believe that the Raptors will go as far as Scottie Barnes can lead them this season. And that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I certainly enjoyed being able to deliver good news instead of bad news. And if you like watching these videos, please subscribe, please leave a like on the video, please leave a comment either here or on Twitter, where you can reach me at Raps Report. I'm always interested to hear from other Raptors fans. It's great to be part of such a great community, and I want to hear from you, so let me know there. And as always, thanks for tuning into Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.